everybody. Welcome to Ask the Pastor. My name is Matt Love. I'm here with Pastor JD Greear. If you are just listening to us, I just want to say before we dive in, if you're just listening to us, big mistake, all right? Because you could be listening and watching at the same time. We are on YouTube now. I think we've said that, so I'm sure most of you guys have checked that out, but we're on YouTube, so check that out.
Watch the Pastor and His Friend.
Exactly. Watch the pastor and his friend answer questions. It's really good. And you never know. We might do some, we need to get to the place where we're doing some bonus content. You know, maybe we just stick around and have like a different conversation where I just ask JD questions about, how he picks his clothes or how he styles his hair or something like that.
Or maybe for every one thing I say that you don't think is good, you could put a black mark on your face. So
that's exactly right.
At the end, it'd be a declaration of how well I did in the answer.
Just so everyone, there's a scorecard that only the YouTube people get. So, JD, we've been doing this series, kind of start the year on spiritual disciplines. I think it's been really good. I've actually had a lot of people just mention it to me in conversation and how helpful it's been in different categories.
Tell Lindsay, your wife, thank you.
Yes, definitely her. But we have a few episodes left, and today we're going to talk about one that, some of these I feel like are very intuitive. This is a spiritual discipline. I get that. Some of these I think we say it, we talk about it. I wonder if people think about it as a spiritual discipline, but we're going to talk about giving. So everybody, loves talking about giving and money, right? So, just help us kind of start unpacking this a little bit.
Yeah. When people ask me the question, I've been a pastor now, and this is weird to say, but I've been a pastor for over 2 decades, going on 23 years here. And when people ask me, what are the things that are most different now than 20-some years ago, I would think it's the comfort that I have talking about money as it relates to the Christian life. And it's not because I've just gotten brazen or, we really need money and I'm not ashamed of it. It really is just because of how central I know it is to the Christian life in terms of what it means to be a faithful disciple. And in fact, a lot of times, and I know you've heard me say this, Matt, I will tell people at our church, if this is causing a problem for you, me talking about the discipline of generosity, the discipline of stewardship, then it is important to me that I not be an obstacle to that. So I'm going to give you permission and even request that you give somewhere else. I would much rather you give somewhere else than I would to let some bad experience you've had become a stumbling block to you becoming a real disciple, because one of the things I'm absolutely convinced of, the Bible is crystal clear on, is that you cannot be a full follower of Jesus until there's been faithfulness in this area. It's one of the reasons Jesus talked about it so much. It's we always say our fourth discipleship identity. Worshiper is number one. The second one is family member. The third one is servant. Fourth is steward. That's really what we're talking about here. And the fifth one is witness. So let me just start with the assumption, okay, that God doesn't need our money. Psalm 50 says it pretty clearly. God says, I don't have needs. And you know what? If I did have a need, I wouldn't come to you with it. God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. He can sell one anytime he needs and fund anything he wants. He's not looking to us. But money reveals more than anything. It reveals what we treasure and trust the most. Our mouths can talk a big spiritual game all day long. We can sing every worship song. We can listen to podcasts. We can read the Bible. But it's what we do with our money, Jesus says, that shows where our heart actually is, which is why he talked about it all the time. It's his most frequently addressed subject. 16 of his 38 parables were about money. Every once in a while, you get somebody who's like, well, we should just talk about Jesus' ministry in the Bible and not about money. I'm like, if you're talking about Jesus and the Bible, he's talking about this, and not because he needed it. He talked about handling money more than he did about relationships, more than he did about heaven and hell. 500 verses in the Bible are about prayer. Less than 500 are about faith, but more than 2,000 are about money. 1 out of every 10 verses in the Gospels talks about it. Again, I want to say Jesus didn't need it. He wasn't raising money for his own ministry. He could, multiply bread and fish whenever he wanted. He could catch fish and pull, gold coins out of their mouth whenever he wanted to. He talked about it because it was the most reliable indicator of our heart. In fact, Jesus warned in Matthew 6 that money, only thing he ever talked like this about, money, he says, is the primary substitute in our hearts for God. He said, no uncertain terms, that we cannot serve God and money. He never said that about sex. He never said that about power. I'm not saying that those are less evil. I'm just saying he never talked about it in those terms. He said, you cannot serve God and money. Money is the one thing that if you love it, then you just won't care about God. And if you love God, you won't care about it that much. So it shouldn't surprise us that this is a central Christian discipleship issue.
Yeah, no, I mean, and again, like I mentioned at the beginning, we don't always think about it as a discipline, but clearly it's something that he talks about a lot, and is a huge kind of how we deal with and think about money is a huge part of what indicates where our hearts are and how we're walking with God. And it's actually a good jumping off point to a comment from a listener named Rita. Now, this is Ask the Pastor, not comment to the pastor, but it was a great comment. So we're reading it anyway.
We'll take it. We'll take it.
It was really helpful. So she said something that she's learning regarding the spiritual discipline of giving. Is just this idea. She talks about how James urges us to consider why God gave us our money in the first place, which I think is a helpful idea.
Yeah, Rita, let me just affirm that, because that's, I said this really quickly at the beginning, so let's camp on it here. The real issue is being a steward. The difference in a steward and an owner is an owner owns, it's actually yours. A steward means you're taking care of it for somebody else. And the way Jesus taught us to think about our money was we think of it as stewards. It's not mine. It's not just that I pay a 10% tax to God and then 90% of it is mine. 100% of it is his. And so I'm really saying, God, what do you want me to do with all of it? That's why Jesus said, ultimately, what you treasure and trust the most is going to be revealed by what you do with your money. It's very fascinating that in Matthew 6, Jesus actually he takes two different personality types and he explains the different problems that they have with money. For some, money is their security. And what I mean by that is it's their safeguard against tragedy or a rainy day. And so when they get an extra $1,000 in their paycheck, they want to save it, right? That's just what they do instinctively. For others, money is their significance. It means that, that they'll be happy and they'll have pleasure in life. So when they get an extra $1,000 in their paycheck, they want to not save it. They want to spend it. New TV, new drapes, go on vacation. By the way, Matt, I've noticed that in God's providence, these two different personality types always get married to each other.
In fact, I would guess Dave Ramsey's whole career is built on this idea that there are these two types of people and that they're married to one another. So I love that. Yeah,
I'd almost be curious. Are you and Lindsay different on this? You don't have to go into detail.
Unfortunately, God decided to curse us with both being spenders. And so because I'm closer to being a saver, I have to fill that role. But we're deeply in trouble. Okay. No, I'm just joking. We're doing great.
Okay. So Christmas gift to you is savings bonds is what I'm hearing.
Exactly right.
Yeah, right. Gotcha. Well, the irony, Matt, is that when you are in a marriage like mine is, where the different personality types go different ways with this, each one thinks the other one has a problem with money. But Jesus actually said they have the same problem in that basically they both look to money to provide something only God can provide. It's both an idol issue. It's that they don't see themselves as stewards. They don't see themselves as belonging to God. They see themselves, money has become their God. One, it's their source of security. The other is their source of significance or pleasure. To those who think of money as security, Jesus in Matthew 6 says, hey, think about the ravens. They don't save, but God takes care of them. That doesn't mean you never save. It just means that you can trust. God knows what your needs are for the future. You don't have to hoard it like there's going to be no God tomorrow. And to those who think of money as their significance, Jesus says, think about the lilies. They don't spend a lot of money, and look how beautiful they are. God can add beauty and significance to your life. To both of them, he unites his counsel to say, hey, put God first, seek him first, and then all the rest of these things. In context, the rest of these things are security and significance. He'll add that to you.
Okay, so JD, I think there's a question I've definitely gotten asked. I'm sure you've gotten asked something similar to this, because whenever we talk about giving, I feel like a lot of people, there's some people that's like, okay, make it practical. Like, what are you asking? All right, do I give 10%? Is that the rule? If I do that, am I good? Is it, something else? Like, how do people think about that tithing piece, that practical piece of what this looks like?
Yeah, well, we've devoted a whole other, full podcast to this, so I won't go in great depth here, but let me just sort of give you the Cliff Notes version of it. As Rita pointed out a moment ago, the ultimate issue here is not an amount of money we're giving to God, it's learning to see ourselves as stewards. And God doesn't own 10% of me, he owns 100% of me, so it's not that I pay a tax and I'm done. A lot of people like to point out, hey, Old Testament, 10%, that was the law. In fact, if you add it all up, it's like 23%, and so tithing is no longer relevant to us. And I get where they're saying that, but what is relevant to us is first fruits giving, which means that for as long as God has had children, had his people, from Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Abraham onward, a long time before the law, he taught them, give the first and the best back to me as a way of acknowledging that you're just a steward, that the first portion belongs to me. We always say 10% is a great place to start with that. because it 10% was what they did. It's what tithe literally meant, and that predates the law. So you always say tithing should never be the goal of your giving, the ceiling of your giving. It could be the floor of your giving. It's where you ought to start. Jesus in Matthew 23 affirms the tithe. He actually says, "Hey, you religious leaders, you tithe everything," and that's awesome. He said, but you haven't even then really gotten into true gospel giving. And so we always say to people, listen, yes, start with a tithe, but that shouldn't be your goal. Ask God what he wants you to do with the other 90%. And it may be that you're spending too much money as a lily or a raven, spending or saving. And maybe what you can do is put the kingdom of God first. We always say that first 10% should go to the local church. I don't want to, overly play this, but God has one primary institution. In fact, only one institution in the New Testament. It's the local church. So we say, give first to your local church because that should be the locus and the hub of ministry. I tell our people that in some ways I'm almost like they're almost like think of it like a stockbroker. And I don't know what stocks will do well, so I give it to my stockbroker and say, "Will you invest this for me?" I know our jobs is to investigate ministries that give a really good, not ROI, return on investment, but eternal return on investment. And so you ought to be able to give to your church as a way of giving to those in a very, effective way. We always say you don't give to the church as much as you give through it. So I would encourage you, give that first 10% to the church. Then if you want to give to JDGM after that as a great ministry, Summit Life, become one of our gospel partners, or maybe Crew, or, some organization that really is doing an effective job reaching people, Compassion. I would encourage you to do that generously, but do that above and beyond the tithe, not in place of.
That's really good. Well, thanks, JD. That's really helpful. And we've got one more week left in this series talking about spiritual disciplines. We're going to be talking about worship. So go ahead and grab your Toby Mac CDs. Go ahead and pop that in. Start listening to those. Get ready for that talk. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you listen to this, and again, if you're just listening to this, hop on over to YouTube. Subscribe at j.d.greear. And you can watch us. And then also, finally, I just kind of want to shout out Two Cities Church gave me this quarter zip. Winston-Salem, Kyle Mercer, lead pastor, was there this week. Awesome church. So if you're in Winston-Salem, go check out Two Cities. I don't know if you'll get a quarter zip or not.
That's a great plug. And I noticed you only have 3 permanent ink marks on your head.
Yeah. Now. You did pretty good.
3 strikes in my answer. Okay.
Not bad. All right, everybody. We'll see you next time on Ask the Pastor.